All right, guys. Hi there. It's Julia with another episode of the Ethical Consumer Podcast. And I am here today, though not in person, but his background looks awesome if you want to check it out on the YouTube, with Eric Jensen of Yellow Table Farms in Tripola, Iowa. Welcome, Eric. I'm excited
Thank
to
you,
have you
Julia.
on my computer screen at least today. And if you are not viewing this, guys, right now on the YouTubes or have not seen the social media posts of it, he is actually in his high tunnel right now where he grows. Well, tell him what you grow. What all do I see there? I see tomatoes, I see lettuce.
Yeah, so in the back here we have a little bit of a few tomatoes. There's a couple rows of that. There's a little bit of lettuce back in here, and directly behind me there's some broccoli that I'm hoping I get a crop out of this year yet. So
Cool.
we'll see. And then yeah, on this side there's more lettuce, kale, kohlrabi,
Oh, I
and that's about it
love
right now.
kohlrabi. So crunchy. It's like my favorite.
Nice.
You know, you get sick of
Oh
carrots
yeah.
every once in a while because, like, you grew up eating carrots. Everyone loves carrots. There's always carrots and everything. But then kohlrabi has that, like, crunch, but it's kind of starchy at the same time. I love it.
Yeah. Oh,
Ooh,
it's so
yes.
good on a hot summer day.
All right. Well, Eric, your farm is pretty special, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But first, I, as assuming our listeners would also like to hear how you came to your farm. What was your origin story? Did you grow up on a farm, or did you just kind of decide you wanted to?
So yeah, I did grow up on a farm. I was between Denver and Dunkerton, just fairly close to this region. But yeah, my parents actually worked in town. So we did, we had like a small garden and a few animals that we would show in 4-H, but nothing too intense, nothing like what I'm doing today. Um, but yeah, after I graduated high school and college, I played in a lot of bands, a lot of punk and heavy metal and country type stuff.
Everything.
And a lot of those guys that I was hanging around with were really into growing food too. So we actually all lived on a farm for a little bit of time, and so we played music and grew food and just did that thing for a while. So I think that kind of got embedded into me, uh, and it was kind of through the love of music. I decided I want to
That's
farm.
cool. That's kind of a roundabout way to get there because you'd think most of the time you grew up kind of farm adjacent in the country, but then it was your bands and your bandmates that kind of brought you back around to it. Cool. So
Yeah,
when did you
absolutely.
acquire or when did you purchase this farm?
So we purchased this farm just outside of Tripola
Okay.
about 4 years ago. Yeah, and I was always looking for a farm to actually grow vegetables and raise animals on, and it was just constantly looking. But previous to that, I was buying smaller acreages, fixing them up, and selling them, and I would just constantly be looking. And this one popped up, and I just jumped on it, and I knew this was the place right when I showed up. So once we got the place, we moved in and just
That's
started farming
awesome.
right
What do you
away.
remember the first crop that you had or what was the first thing that you did when you got the farm?
So the first crop, I didn't really know what I was doing at all. So I think I was just putting everything in. I overshot it, but I guess really the first thing we got established was the asparagus patch. So it was that 1 acre of asparagus that we got in because we knew we wouldn't really get a decent crop off that for
Okay.
about 3 years. So we wanted to get that rolling right away. So we did that, and then I just started growing everything else, which was kind of a mistake at first because there's just way too much to do. But yeah, the asparagus
Cool.
is what really kicked it off. That, and then the garlic. I've been growing garlic for probably 10 years or so. So I carried that over onto the farm, and we just keep
Okay.
expanding
So
that
the
as well.
asparagus you said that takes a couple years or a couple seasons to really take. Are you just now seeing kind of the fruits of that
Right.
labor or when did that start to pop up?
We got a little bit of the asparagus to eat for ourselves the past couple of years, but next year will actually be the first year we can
Okay.
do a full harvest on it. So it should be anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, I
Cool.
believe, of
Oh,
harvest.
awesome. So you're always adding
Yeah,
to what you're offering at farmers markets and then to farm to table style wholesale, which is super cool. You're always changing and evolving.
right. Right, absolutely. Yeah, 'cause we're learning as we go too, so we're trying to figure out what people want, and we're growing what they want. And we're still growing what we like, and just
Sure.
adding to it every year. And eventually, we're gonna put a orchard in the back few acres with nut trees like chestnuts and pawpaws and
Oh
persimmons and
man.
probably elderberries
Yes,
and
that'll
things like
be
that.
excellent. Persimmons are one of those things
Yeah.
that you don't get to come across them frequently, but it's like the best treat when you do. If anyone's ever had a persimmon, I love them. I'm thinking about it right now and my mouth is kind of starting to water.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be
Oh,
excited when
yeah.
you get persimmons.
Definitely good. All
Cool.
right.
So
I'll be
you
on it.
are in your high tunnel right now. Now, what does that help you do?
So it's a few different things that it helps us do. It helps us be protected from the crazy weather
Mm-hmm.
that we typically have. So when like the first year we started growing out here, we got 10 inches of rain overnight. So instead of having all the crops get washed out and just fail because of the heavy rainfalls, it protects the crop from rain. It protects it from wind, from excessive heat. And it also extends the seasons on both sides. So we'll get an earlier crop in the spring and then a later
Okay.
crop in the fall.
So it allows you a little bit more climate control even though you're outside. It's not quite a greenhouse.
Right, right. And we're still growing in the ground, so we still get super tasty food and healthy food. It's not grown
Okay.
hydroponically at all. So, yeah, it's still
Cool. Now
living in the
you
ground.
mentioned in the ground, so we're going to jump right into that because the ground is something that is very sacred to you and is kind of not really a point of contention, but something to be considered when you are farming and when people are looking for perhaps farmers market goods or even asking a little bit better of their supermarket grocers. You have a no-till farm.
Yes,
And
yeah, that is
that's
correct.
a
So
pretty
we're
special thing to have around here, I think. Maybe you have a couple buddies that do it, but I don't know of anybody else personally. Do you want to tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are not
Okay.
100% no-till yet, but we are in the works of being
Sure.
100% no-till, hopefully. So we're pretty passionate about not tilling the soil. For one, when you till the soil, it releases carbon into the atmosphere, which contributes to greenhouse
Hmm.
gases and warming. Um, so aside from that, when you're tilling, you're also destroying the structure of the soil because it takes a long time to develop all the networks within the soil between root systems, fungus, bacteria, all the bugs living in there, earthworms. They all create habitat and have a certain way of talking to each other. So when you're going in there with a tiller, it just destroys that. And every time you do that, you have to wait for it to either come back or you have to add synthetic chemicals, fertilizers, things like that to try to make all the plants happy. So we're trying to develop a system where, and we've learned this from a lot of other farmers, we're trying to not till at all and use very like low methods of
Sure.
disturbing the soil.
So, in addition to not wrecking the own little ecosystem of the soil, you are also not adding chemicals into the ground to create these networks essentially artificially.
Correct. Yeah, not artificially. We'll use organic fertilizers and primarily compost, and a lot of that stuff comes off the farm too with the sheep and the chickens. We'll compost that, put it to the garden. So we're trying to keep the nutrients here and get it from the farm and keep it on the
So you kind of have
farm.
a closed circle, which was we were talking before about this episode. I think that's just so cool. You have sheep, you
Yeah.
have chickens as well, in addition to having plant crops, being able to harvest vegetables that end up eventually on our table via your local farmers markets or your local farm to table restaurant. So you
Right.
mentioned
Yeah.
something about the chicken coop, and you have kind of a special thing going on in addition to the no-till, so that you have a very organic way of putting the nutrients and the natural fertilizer and natural compost from your chickens and your lambs. How do you do that?
So it's another thing we're still working on and constantly trying to improve. But right now we are rotating the sheep through our pastures. So we don't just keep them in one large area and let them eat the grass down to nothing. We try to put them in a certain allotted area, which we call paddocks. And they're on that for right now about a week to 2 weeks. And then we'll open the next paddock up and they'll go into that. And then eventually we're going to have the chickens in there to clean up parasites and things like that that the sheep might have left behind. And then we'll just constantly keep bouncing them to a new paddock. And then hopefully they won't see that same paddock again for another 30 to 40 days.
So you rotate, the sheep go in first, they eat the grass, enough of the grass, but not too much of the grass and the plants that are growing there. And then they do their thing and they leave some droppings, also known as wonderful fertilizer. And then you move them. The chickens come in, pick through, and clean up everything essentially. And then the land is ready for more feed, more grass, or perhaps a new crop, depending on the season.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that all that manure just feeds the grass and it just helps it produce a better stand for the next time they come around.
So you rotate, you said the sheep about every 30 days or so. Is there, I mean, I don't know how many sheep you have, I guess. What's the size of your flock and what are the advantages of, perhaps I'm assuming you have a smaller type of flock. What are the advantages of that compared to like huge farming with animals?
Right. Yeah. So we're intentionally trying to keep our flock small. We're right around 26 or 28 ewes right now. And ewes are the female sheep for anybody that's wondering. And then we have one ram that stays in with the ewes. So we keep it small. We're not trying to feedlot them. So a lot of larger farmers are trying to get as many animals into a small area as possible. And they're not eating what they're meant to be eating. So they're not eating grass. They're brought in a lot of grains from somewhere else and they stay in that one area. So they just have a little bit less healthy of a life.
And that doesn't sound so good to me. They're standing and they don't have any chickens coming in to clean up after them. So what drops on the ground stays there and then they're stepping in it, which makes me sad.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah, it is.
So
it is, yeah.
when did you decide to add livestock to your farm? You said you started out with the asparagus and kind of wanting to do plants. When did you bring the animals in?
Well, it was that following year because we actually started off with a couple head of cattle, and our farm is a little on the smaller side. So I just kept seeing the cattle just destroy the land, for lack of a better word. Yeah, they eat so much and they compact the soil, and we didn't want to do that. So that following year, we got rid of the cattle, and then we bought 10 ewes and one ram, and that's what we started with about 3 years ago.
So you already saw kind of some of the destruction that happens when you have a very large animal that eats a whole lot and you maybe don't have perhaps the space, but would you say cattle are just a little bit problematic in the fact that they consume so much?
Yeah, they consume a lot. And to do it correctly, I think you need a lot of pasture land to do it right. So we seen that right away. And we actually ate lamb that year as well. And we were like, this is delicious.
That works. They seem to be a little bit more gentle on your landscape, and I'm assuming a little easier to herd. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, they're easier to
So
handle.
as you started out, clearly you've already had, some revelations, some realizations as far as like crops and the ease and the difficulty of certain crops and the ease and the difficulty of certain types of animals to have on the farm. And you have this super awesome tunnel. What would you say the biggest challenge is trying to farm as you are farming with the mostly no-till, not using pesticides? Would you say it's weather or virus or anything?
Well, weather is one of them, that's for sure. Like the first 2 years were insane. We got so much rain, it was almost impossible. I almost gave up a few times because the ground was so wet, it didn't dry out, nothing really grew. This year was a little bit better because it was a lot drier, but I'm also like irrigating everything. But yeah, aside from like erratic weather patterns, I think the hardest thing is trying to get it all done primarily myself. We have, my parents, family, my wife helping here and there, but I think the biggest challenge is labor, and I haven't really directly went out to look for somebody to help out, but I think I will next year.
So we have some mutual friends, the Morrows of Two Morrows Acres, and you actually you kind of have this network of farmers, whether it be flower farmers or additional vegetable or livestock farmers. You have this little network of help. And I understand you needed some extra help for your garlic, which kind of exploded this year.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot. We pulled 7,000 heads of garlic this July. So yeah, just definitely needed some help. And we're actually still cleaning that up right now. So yeah, I had some friends come out. Darren from Apples on the Avenue on 218, my parents. The Morrows came out to help with the tunnel earlier in the spring. So yeah, it's kind of cool. Like all the little farmers that are in the area, they are always definitely willing to help. And it's just like a mutual agreement that everybody's just kind of there to help each other when we are needed.
Because so your wife is on the farm with you as well. Does she play a big part in it, or does she kind of like have one or two jobs that she takes care of aside from her absolute moral support, which is hands down the most important?
Oh yeah, she's the motivator in the house, but she does play a couple large parts. Like we have a pretty big egg operation, so she's heading that up, cleaning everything, packing them nice, and make sure those get to where they need to be. And she's always out there helping when she can too, aside from her full-time job in town.
So the farming, you've arrived at a point, thankfully now, where farming is your single gig. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. I decided a couple of years ago just to give everything else up and just put everything I had into this 100%. And I gave myself 3 years to make it work, and this is actually the third year, and I think we're doing good.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you're still going. I would certainly hope so. It's a lot of time and energy spent into something that could end up sideways, just like you said, with weather or with need.
Oh yeah.
Have you found that there's been a pull for more farmers market food or more pull for getting your food into restaurants? Which would you say sustains your lifestyle the most?
It's a pretty even balance right now between the farmers markets, direct sales, and the restaurants that are buying our products. But I mean, each one of them is pretty huge. So I'm definitely thankful for everybody that is helping keep the farm going.
That community and staying local especially is so important to our farmers. We had an episode with a semi-local, Iowa-based at least, beekeeper, Carol Fastminder Orth. It was a couple episodes ago. And that's hands down what she said as well, having, community support and having the appreciation of your local community. Otherwise, the livelihood tends to disappear, and we definitely don't want that. And it's sometimes hard for us as the consumers to see that this is live or die, guys. This is whether you guys get to eat as well or not.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Farming is just a huge struggle in general. And if it wouldn't have anybody buying the food, it would be much harder.
Well, and the way that you've decided to do it, I think, is so admirable. Did you originally set out to do no-till and perhaps pursue organic certification, or did you just kind of put some food in the ground and say, hey, let's see what happens?
No, we always wanted to be organic, and now we're kind of second guessing that because there's a lot of things are kind of, I don't know, I think organic certification is going in a weird way. But originally wanted to become certified organic, but after just doing it and learning more about the soil and learning about growing food, we just started realizing that no-till is probably the way to do it. So we just started focusing more on that and learning more about
So organic versus no-till. Organic, obviously not including pesticides, not including genetically modified organisms, ingredients, what have you. What is, let's see, with no-till is organic, is it not? But you're just not choosing to pursue the certification.
Right. And we
Sure.
might get certified. We don't know yet. We don't know if we want to spend the money. I think it might be better spending the time with our customers and just telling them what we're doing. And then they might see that it's just going beyond organic anyways. So we might not need the organic certification. I think it's better to have that direct connection with the consumer anyways, instead of having a third party come in saying, hey, this is
Hands down.
food.
That's been something that I've heard from a lot of our podcast guests so far, and something that they are thankful for, to still be fairly small and local. With they have that trust aspect, even if they don't decide to drop the time and the money, because it is a considerable amount of time and money. And when you are not there working your crops and tending to your fields and your livestock, that can make a huge difference. At some point, you need to find that balance of working and producing, and then, okay, how important is this for the customers that I have, for what I'm doing right now?
Right. Hopefully they understand it, and hopefully that message just spreads to other
I think
people.
going to the farmers markets too, that helps a lot, because they get to see you and they know that you're the one behind the food that they're buying, and they can trust what you're saying, and they know that you're maybe a 30-minute car ride down the highway.
Yeah, they can pop in and look at their lettuce.
Yes, exactly. Or see it in the video right now. So we're kind of nearing the end of farmers market season here in Iowa, because like you said, with the weather, at some point we just can't be outside as much. In the summer, so right now still, where can people find you? What farmers markets can they find you at?
Okay, so yeah, our last Waverly Farmers Market is this Saturday, and that is in the town of Waverly. It's from 8:30 to 11:30, just south of the fire station. So that's the last summer market. And then the Waverly Farmers Market, the winter market actually starts up October 24th and goes every other week. And that is held at the Embassy Vineyard Church, which is right across from Walgreens. Yeah, and we also have an online ordering platform that you can use through the Waverly Farmers Market, and that is WaverlyIAFarmersMarket.com.
Excellent.
And yeah, our products can be found there, and a lot of other
Excellent. So that's a way, at least here locally in our community, that people can still support farmers market vendors, even if it's winter, whether they choose to go every other to the church in Waverly, or they can place an order. Is that directly through you online?
It's a team effort through another farmer, Whistling Thistle Farm, and ourselves. So we kind of both keep the site up and going and update it. And then there's a few other vendors on there as well, so that are pretty nice products. But yeah, aside from there, we also do the College Hill Farmers Market on College Hill in Cedar Falls, and that is every Thursday, and that goes
so we have a little more time on that one. We should be able to get this episode out, I think, with a couple days left in the October one. We shall see, but we know where we can find it in the off season at least, because that'll be nice. And in addition to doing the farmers markets, you also have a couple what we're going to call wholesale accounts through a state local co-op, and then through a few businesses. Now, how did you start to develop the relationship with restaurants, and who was your first take? Who decided to pick you up?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just started going to every restaurant that I could physically get to, and just go in there, pop in, say hi, tell them what we were doing, what we were growing, and just to ask if they're interested. So it was very time consuming, and not many people wanted our products. But the very first one was Tony from the Wild Carrot in Waverly, and she has awesome food up there if you're ever in Waverly. But yeah, she was the first one that really started buying our lettuce, and then eggs and tomatoes and things like that.
So it was just kind of luck of the draw. You went and you put out a bunch of feelers, and thankfully someone bit.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and it kind of kept going from there. So after selling the Wild Carrot, then Single Speed started buying this year, and Beaver Hill Golf Course, Oneota Co-op, the Tripola School System. So yeah, there's quite a few people just started buying it. Just, you need to get that first one.
For sure.
Get your
Now,
name
you
out
mentioned
there.
the Tripoli school system, which I think is just so awesome. And I need to look more into where school systems get their food from. But the fact that they're getting it local in their community is so cool. So
Right.
do they order from you on a
It
weekly
is.
or a monthly basis, or is it as needed?
It's usually, it seems right
Okay.
now it's like every other week. So they're really into getting the tomatoes, and the kids love them up there. So yeah, it's always good to know that our food is being consumed by people that like it
Yes,
2 miles
exactly.
away.
And I mean, you could drive to the school and see the smiles on the kids' faces when they get them too, which is cool.
Yeah.
Do the kids know that they're eating something that's local?
I'm not exactly sure, but I think the cook up there tells them. She seems to be pretty
Okay.
interactive with the
That's
kids. I think she
awesome.
would probably
I think that a whole
Yeah.
purpose of this podcast is to kind of start to blend the disconnect between where our food comes from and us actually eating it, and to start at such a young age and have that
Right.
appreciation of, oh, here's this tomato on my lunch tray. You don't really wonder where it comes from. You
Right.
just know you got a tomato on your lunch tray, and maybe you love tomatoes, maybe you hate tomatoes, and that's all you care about. But to know that it's coming from someone local, and to just be that much closer to the relationship and how tomatoes are actually grown. I think a lot of kids don't get that opportunity, and I think that's really cool that you're even in the school system.
Yeah. Yeah. And oddly enough, that was like one of the easiest places I got
Too
into.
good.
So it's always, yeah.
Well,
good.
and also we mentioned you on the single speed episode with my dear friend Rachel, and that was really fun to see that you guys were in there.
Yeah,
Super,
that's
super
awesome.
cool. I love all of the connections that we have just even around this
Yeah.
podcast
Yeah, it was kind of
and in town too.
right. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Yeah, I used to work at the Wonder Bread back in the day, so it's kind of neat seeing that get flipped into a
So were
brewery by
you
single
you
speed.
worked at the Wonder Bread at downtown Waterloo, that facility there? Oh my gosh. So
I did.
you
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, like yeah, I do. Yeah, I was sweating there.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
constantly.
I remember.
It was a pretty hard place to work. I was in the proof room. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was hanging out in the proof room most of the time at Wonder Bread, and it's usually 100 degrees in there, and 100% humidity. So it's
Oh
always
my
nice
goodness.
workout.
I remember touring it. I think it was a school trip. I don't remember what grade I was in, but we went and toured the Wonder Bread factory when it was still in operation. And that was kind of a cool thing to see too. Even being kind of a giant at the time, company like Wonder Bread, being able to go and see, where was that bread coming from? And we still had an outlet on University Avenue in Waterloo at the time. And so you could see a brand that was being sold at your grocery store, and you could actually see where it was coming from. But then, yeah, with you guys taking it even
Right.
farther and having the raw ingredient, the actual tomato coming from your farm too, I think that's just so cool. And for those of you who are not
Yeah,
sure what
for
we're
sure.
talking about, we did a live episode at Single Speed Brewery in Waterloo, Iowa. They have a location in Waterloo and Cedar Falls. And they recycled essentially an entire building. They received a grant through the Historical Society. It's actually registered on Iowa's Historic Places. And they took this old Wonder Bread, what would you have called it? Bread factory or bread manufacturer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bread
Factory sounds kind of like a weird word for food, so we're going to just disregard that. But they took this old factory and flipped it into the brewery and tap room that they have today. So I think that might have been episode 4, maybe episode 5, guys, if you want to go check that one out. That one was a pretty cool one to do as well. So rotating back to your livestock. Now, livestock is kind of an interesting topic, and we are an equal opportunity podcast in the sense that we support humanely raised animals. We support those who choose to lead a vegan and plant-based lifestyle. Now, you have said before you have a pretty hands-off approach, and we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but you are hands-off when it comes to your lambs.
Yeah, as far as like, yeah, the birthing process, we try to let them do the work because sheep have been doing this for thousands of years. So yeah, they know what's going on, and we kind of just we keep an eye on them because every once in a while there are a few complications. But yeah, primarily we just hang back and let them do their things, provide them a warm place to stay in the wintertime, and make sure they're getting enough hay and water and mineral and things like that. But other than moving them every day and keeping an eye on them, yeah, we just
Okay.
try to let them do
Now,
their thing.
you mentioned so and that we are in Iowa too, and much like you have the high tunnel to just extend the season a little bit for your vegetation. What sort of a setup do you have for your livestock when it does start to drop? They mostly have free rein, but you do have a cozy situation for them when the weather gets dicey.
Yeah, yeah, I have a nice barn set up for them, and so we keep them out as long as possible. And they are
Mm-hmm.
extremely hardy animals, where they'll stay out there, into January if it's not like below freezing, and they can handle it just fine. But yeah, once lambing season comes around, which is usually mid to late February, we'll bring everybody up to the barn, and yeah, they hang out there, and they still have access to outside in one of the paddocks. So yeah, they're up there for a few months until it starts turning warm again in April, and they're back out to pasture pretty close to
Okay.
usually
So they're
May.
really not inside for very long comparatively. You're able to have a system that allows them to stay out a little longer, come out as soon as possible, and have
Right.
the choice too. I suppose you give your animals the choice if they want to be inside or outside,
Right. Yeah, we give them the
which is
choice.
nice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we have little yeah, we have little areas they can get to like the asparagus too because I'm trying to like fertilize that too. So I'll feed them hay out in the asparagus so they can go out there, eat
You're
some hay, go
baiting
back to
them
the
to come
barn.
eat the asparagus and then essentially manure in the asparagus so that you have better soil. I love it. These are the behind
Yeah,
the scenes that you
absolutely.
don't get to see. You know, we like to think the farming process is one of those like nice and tidy sort of operations. But the best way to do it for the land and for the animals and of course for the vegetation for the crops is to let Mother Nature basically do it on her own and to just give her the best circumstances to do it in. Super
Right.
cool. So if you were not mostly no-till, what would a day on a farm look like, or what would the alternatives be as far as pesticides?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think if I was not no-till, yeah, I would seeing other vegetable farmers do their thing. I'd be tilling a lot more frequently. I'd be adding a lot of synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, things like that. And it just, I mean, yeah, it kills all the bugs, kills all the diseases that could be around, but it's just like a sterile environment. Yeah, and along with that, it just tilling the soil. I know it's a smaller operation, but it still releases carbon into the atmosphere. Um, yeah, it's just I want a biodiverse landscape that I can hopefully control with no-till and add good things to it to keep it alive and thriving and keep the nutrients into the plants so it can there replenish our
Sure.
bodies and keep us
And
healthy.
later on the podcast as well, we're going to have a couple people on that are from an initiative to allow people to realize, how everything really is interconnected as far as farms and the food that we get from our farms to perhaps the runoff from pesticides usage that goes into our water that in turn gets
Right.
consumed by us and consumed by the livestock again. And it's kind of this vicious cycle.
It is, yeah. But it's cool to see all these little farms popping up that know what makes a difference, and even though they're small, I think they
Mm-hmm.
are spreading, and people are starting to slowly change their minds. And there is going to be a huge turnover in land here in the next few years because a lot of these older farmers that are retiring with old ideas is getting turned over to their kids, which hopefully have new
Sure.
ways of thinking. So I'm hoping the land gets turned into hands where they can
That's
start taking
awesome.
care
I
of it
think
more.
in general, there's been a really big and welcomed shift. As yes, perhaps some people retire or old ideas
Right.
are retired, and everyone's held a little bit more accountable. I'm excited to see
Right,
what happens.
absolutely.
I think so
Yeah,
too. I think so too. So you started out humble beginnings, kind of thinking you wanted a farm, finally secured it, and then ended up being a businessman at the same time because you have to be. What is some advice you would
yeah.
give to perhaps someone who is wanting to start that homestead or farm life?
Okay. Yeah, I would say write down your goals. It might sound cliche, but just write them down. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy. It doesn't have to be a business plan, but just have a starting point. Have the big goals, and then start breaking it down into smaller goals, and start chipping away at that. And and then have a daily to-do list too. I think that's super important. Have something you can just cross off after
Sure.
you do it, um, and just keep working towards those larger goals. And don't forget about the big picture either. Like you might get lost in the details of the day-to-day life or on the farm or any business really, but try to step back and look at why you're getting into it in the first place, and that might rejuvenate you a little bit and um, inspire you and
Sure.
push you to
I
keep
think
going
that's
further.
beautiful advice. And for everyone too, not even just those wanting to be in the farming community. It's it's the what your why. What is your why? And it's something that I firmly believe in too is why are you doing this? Okay, step back. Are you still doing it for that reason? It gets interesting.
Right, right.
And then, what
Absolutely.
advice would you have for consumers who are perhaps looking to support a more local farm or who are curious and maybe would ask more of their current farmers or grocers?
Yeah, I would say first off, I'm sure a lot of people have heard this, but vote with your dollar. So we eat, well, some of us eat 3 times a day. Use that use that money and put it towards something that matters instead of putting it into a big company like Walmart or McDonald's, where they like money is power. If you give them that money, they're going to have the power. But try to take that away and give it to somebody that matters, a small farmer or somebody that's growing food ethically. I think that's huge. So if you're supporting people that want to take care of the land, you could also reduce a lot of problems that the world is seeing right now. So, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody can do that every single day.
It is the small things. It's not just the large gestures. It's just supporting what you want to
Yeah.
thrive and maybe not supporting what you
Right.
kind of think may be problematic. And
Yeah.
then, so
Yeah.
I'm assuming you eat a whole lot of what you grow and harvest and raise on the farm. What do you eat perhaps when you're not consuming some of your farmed goods?
Okay. Yeah. So a treat. We don't have it very often, but a treat that we do like having
Mm-hmm.
is pizza. Um, Usually from Luna Valley
Yes.
Farm up by Decorah. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's an awesome setting. They have a brick oven pizza that they bake right there on the farm, and you eat it right out there in the open. So it's pretty amazing. A lot of it's locally sourced proteins and vegetables and ingredients that go onto the pizza as well.
I was so sad. I was going to
Yeah.
get to have some of the Luna Valley Farms. I was supposed to teach at a yoga festival this past June, and they were
Oh,
one of the sponsors for it. And, you know, COVID and being responsible, that
oh,
yoga
cool.
festival did not happen. But they have been on my radar.
Right. Oh, man. Yeah, it's awesome. Anybody that wants to just get away for a little bit, I think they're still serving pizza in a
Hmm.
different way, but they're probably going to go through at least the end of
So they are a
October,
bit
I
more of a
imagine.
seasonal operation as well because they do have the outdoor pizza oven. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So they shut it down, I believe.
Okay.
Whenever it gets cold out, probably
Sure.
end of October,
And while
November.
you're up there
Yeah.
having delicious pizza, you guys can go visit Oneota Co-op, where some of the Yellow Table Farms goods
Right.
are. That was just like the
Absolutely.
most
Yeah.
perfect segue there. Did you like that? So we can find you guys
That was
at the
awesome.
Oneota Co-op and then at several of the farmers markets in the area when in season. And then you mentioned the Waverly off-season alternatives as well. Now, are you doing some
Yeah.
direct ordering at all over the winter? What are you able to keep going? I mean, the garlic, I'm assuming, lasts for quite a while.
Yeah, the garlic will last several months, so it's all harvested. We're cleaning it. We're going to store it properly, so that should be good to go until March, April at the very least. So yeah, we'll have garlic. We're planning on having lettuce in the high
Okay.
tunnel till the end of the year. We have a lot of winter squash, which
Oh,
some
hello.
of these
They're
guys
beautiful.
here. Yeah, so a lot of these guys are curing right now, so
Okay.
we'll have those available. We'll have lamb available, eggs available. Yeah, probably kale and kohlrabi, collard greens, like those
Sure.
cold hardy vegetables.
Now, and
as
we
well.
can get those ones through the
Yeah.
Waverly off-season farmers market, and then you are also at Hanson's Dairy in Cedar Falls and Waterloo. Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. Yeah, they carry a few of our products, and they keep it rotating depending on what we have. So you might pop in and find something new, or find stuff
Cool.
that's been there a while. So it's a good place to
Excellent.
find our
And then
products.
we can find more information online always via www.yellowtablefarm.com. And then, sure, go ahead.
That's a work in progress. The website's a work in progress. We'll have that up
Okay.
and going here this winter, and you should be able to buy our products on the website
Excellent.
eventually,
So
too.
we'll be able to buy directly through you as well, which is always beneficial. Super. And then
Yeah, absolutely.
for everyone to see what's going on, what you're harvesting at the time, what's going on with the sheep, with the chickens, they can find you guys on Facebook and Instagram. And I love what you post because you get to see not only the kitten
thanks.
posts, but the actual farm posts too. But you get to see what goes on behind the scenes.
Right.
And that, again, is something that when you're picking up your food from the grocery store, maybe you don't think about. If you're to get from the farmer's market, maybe there's a deeper connection because, again, we get to see your lovely face and we get to see, what you have harvested and what you're having to offer that day as it always rotates, but gets you a little closer to the source and lets
Right.
you remember where your food comes from and thank the people that grow it. So thank you, Eric.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love people to check out our Instagram and keep an eye out for. We're gonna have some new farm shirts available soon. They're pretty unique. So keep an eye
Excellent.
out for
Oh,
that.
that'll be cool. Well, thank you so much. Any last words? Any words of advice to anybody? Any suggestions?
I suggest everybody to seek a coffee roaster in Waverly, Iowa
Ooh.
called Think Well. They have the best coffee I have ever had in my entire life. It's wonderful. It's ran by Eric and Becky. But yeah, they have excellent coffee. If anybody wants to
All
treat, they
right,
should seek
guys.
them out.
We got a new coffee roaster to look out. Are they the ones that went in? Are they new? Okay.
No, they've been around. They operated a coffee shop called
That's
Duos
what I was
in
thinking.
Waverly.
Okay.
Yeah, and that unfortunately that coffee shop is not there anymore, but they are roasting, and it's better than ever. I believe they go out to meet the farmers, so they source all their coffee beans directly.
Excellent. We
do all that
love
good stuff,
direct
too.
trade
It's good
here. Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Eric. And listeners, thank you so much. Again, you can find us at the.ethical.consumer on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. If you're listening to this on iTunes, go ahead and leave us a review if you like what we're doing. And if you are listening to this on podcast format, go check out our YouTube as well because you can see Eric in his wonderful high tunnel with some of his gorgeous lettuce and tomatoes and crops behind him. And we will see you for the next episode.